Hello and welcome to Techweek TV, powered by Callaghan Innovation. My name is Jake Miller. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Unfiltered, and today I'm very honoured to be joined by Kirsten Edgar and Jonathan Miller from the Future Insights team at Callaghan Innovation. Today we're going to be talking about the top technology trends, what you need to know. Specifically, we're going to be talking about the top trends for 2019, what emerging technologies are disrupting the status quo, and what we can all do to prepare for that and also take advantage of some of those really exciting opportunities. So, guys, new technologies are forcing us to rethink how we've traditionally done things, whether this is manufacturing, whether it's, business, almost every aspect of our lives. But today we're going to talk more about megatrends and how those differ. So talk to me about megatrends. What's the difference and why does it matter?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty important. I think we know this is Tech Week, and obviously we're going to talk about technology as well, but it's important not to think about technology in a vacuum, and you have to think about these driving megatrends as well. When we talk about megatrends, these are the really big things that are going to impact the future. Sometimes it's to do with technology, but other times it's not. These are things like climate change, these are things like the rise of the ethical consumer, and the changing power structures around the world.
Yes, okay.
So I'm just going to pick up on that. One of the interesting projections is that the world around us is going to change in terms of those power structures. So I don't know if you know, but there are projections that India is going to be the second largest economy in the world within the next 20 to 30 years. And Indonesia is actually going to be the fourth largest.
Wow.
At the moment, our export in terms of value, we only export 1% to India and 1.9% of our export value to Indonesia.
Right.
So thinking about that sort of megatrend gives forward-thinking New Zealand companies a real opportunity to think about who the consumers of their future are going to be and start preparing for that.
Yeah, absolutely. And those, incredibly relevant statistics for the future of New Zealand. What other megatrends are you both kind of obsessing about now that you think New Zealand needs to be on top of?
I mean, I think this, the rise of the ethical consumer is really important.
Yeah.
And you're seeing this all over the place, and we're seeing that kind of play out with how people feel about plastics, for example. And we're at Callaghan Innovation, we've got a report coming out pretty soon on environmental innovation and the opportunities for New Zealand in that area. So that's another one that I'm particularly interested in.
What can businesses do to sort of capitalise on that as such? Because a lot of companies will, maybe they give away 10 cents of profit of every water bottle sold to some charity. It can often seem not very genuine or true. What are the best ways to actually make your business more of a social enterprise in a way that's authentic?
So it's about connecting who you are and what you do and your values and your mission to where you want the future to be for your children or for your friends' children or for your grandchildren. And I think that if you can make that really solid connection, then that gives a great deal of authenticity to whatever it is you choose to do.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and Allbirds is a really good example.
Absolutely.
They have built their whole value proposition around this kind of ethical, good purchasing decision. And so they designed it to be built out of ethically produced goods, and the whole story is wrapped around that kind of merino wool. Yeah, really great example. They're a billion-dollar company now.
Absolutely, it's a crazy story, and you're so right about consumers more moving towards those challenger brands that actually are much more about just making money, right? It's amazing how fast some of these, particularly in the consumer packaged goods industry, these companies are growing. Yeah.
And the most recent Nielsen shopping survey came out in 2018, showed that 81% of respondents strongly believed that the companies they bought for should be doing good things for the environment as well.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. I want to talk more more about, through what you've learned through some of Callaghan Innovation's research, in particular, some of the main data-related technologies set to impact us in a big way. And there's a lot we can cover, from space tech to precision data to AI, blockchain, autonomous vehicles. There's lots of buzzwords that people are hearing these trends, and they probably don't know what to make of them. So today we're going to go a little bit deeper into those. So feel free to talk to some of those. And I know there's going to be some slides that come up as well as we go.
Yep. Yeah. So a really important one, in my opinion, is around space. And we've all heard about Rocket Lab and Dawn Aerospace. It's very, very exciting that New Zealand is going up into space now. I think a really interesting opportunity in space is actually in the data. So what we're seeing in this area is the democratization of space. What that means is, in the past, it was really, really hard for businesses or entrepreneurs, innovators, to get access to that kind of data unless you were NASA or, Russia or the European Space Agency. But now, with the democratization of space, thanks to companies like Rocket Lab, you and I could start a business with a couple $100,000 in capital from a garage, and we could be deploying this kind of technology in a way that makes a difference for kiwi fruit farmers, for example.
Yeah, that's pretty phenomenal. What about some of those other trends?
Artificial intelligence is another really important one. There's still a lot of water to go under the bridge in relation to that.
Yes.
One that I've sort of stunned me recently in artificial intelligence is I've been following this company called Wobot. It's out of Stanford University. What they're doing is they're deploying cognitive behavioural therapy, which is evidence-based counselling, but over a chatbot. And it's working. These students are getting 20% better kind of mental health because of that. And I just think it's stunning, not only because they've managed to get it to work on a chatbot, but also because this generation is happy to engage with counselling on a chatbot. It's fascinating.
Absolutely.
And scalable.
Yeah, and when it comes to artificial intelligence, from a scale of Mark Zuckerberg to Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg thinking it's the greatest thing that's ever happened to the world, Elon Musk saying it's the most dangerous thing facing humanity. What do you both think about that?
I think that there are some really interesting opportunities for it to be used for really positive purposes. I think there do need to be some serious thought put into how we use it, how it could be misused.
Yes.
But it's one of those interesting areas where I really think there needs to be that expansion of STEM to STEAMed, so pulling in the arts, pulling in the philosophy, pulling in the ethics of the ways in which these technologies could be used.
Yes.
Yeah. And I sort of think what some of those commentators, they're sort of being a little bit almost mischievous and kind of it's trying to get attention. There's a really big upside here, and a report came out last week from the Prime Minister's work they were doing with McKinsey, and it shows that if we can adopt AI and automation as a country earlier rather than later, there's a massive payoff. So the difference is, 430 billion in GDP versus 130 billion in GDP over 10 years. So that's like an $8,000 pay rise for every worker in New Zealand that they get to keep for 10 years. But that's only if we adopt it quickly.
Right, okay. And what are the biggest barriers to that happening in terms of adoption? What can both the government and entrepreneurs watching this do to accelerate that process?
Yep, so I think one of the things is just helping entrepreneurs and innovators really understand what it is that this technology can do and what it is that it can't do. And that's why we released an artificial intelligence white paper which really explains what that is. And I think people need to be getting serious about schooling up on what this technology is and what it means and what it can do.
Yeah, and you're at the session we ran this morning with a panel with a gentleman from LanzaTech and a bunch of other very impressive people. And one of the things I mentioned on the panel was, I think it was Bill Gates that said that we often massively overestimate sort of the impact that technology will have in the short term, but underestimate it in the long term. So we think in 1 or 2 years it's going to change and destroy or disrupt everything, and then in the long term we get that round the wrong way. So as it specifically relates to AI, what do you think the very real impacts will look like in, say, 10 years from now?
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those technologies that's going to have impact everywhere. But a really interesting kind of example, There are scientists in New Zealand working on deploying artificial intelligence and robotics in the forestry sector. So this is a really dangerous sector. 54 people died in the last 10 years. Over 1,000 people were injured in that sector. So I just think it's really exciting that we've got scientists working on using robotics to do pruning in pine trees. They're using automated drones to do that kind of work as well. And so that's just a really nice example of how it's not only about kind of economic gain, it's also about saving lives.
Absolutely, yeah. And let's talk autonomous vehicles, you know, and I do want to go a little bit deeper into that. What are your sort of thoughts on where that's going, you know, how fast that's going to progress? When are we going to have a city of driverless cars?
I better take that one. I think this is another one where people are possibly underestimating the impact that this is going to have. And the thing is, when we think about autonomous vehicles, we usually think about cars, and people are pretty familiar with that. I've been following autonomous shipping, and I think within 2 years we'll see the Norwegians launching a boat that will be capable of autonomously loading, berthing, unberthing, unloading, sailing up and down the coast of Norway. There's a startup that's almost ready with a prototype, and that would replace 40,000 truck journeys per year. So don't just think about cars, also think about drones and ships as well.
Absolutely. And I've got a couple of questions for Kirsten that I want to get into next, but I have one last question for now. Is around blockchain, because it was such a hot topic, particularly in 2018, and you know, obviously the boom and bust as such of Bitcoin. And I know there's a difference there, but in terms of blockchain, where do you think the biggest opportunities are today for smart entrepreneurs to be capitalising on and building valuable companies around?
Yeah, I've never seen such a hyped topic. It's amazing watching that all play out. But I think the really exciting area for entrepreneurs in New Zealand is in that kind of what we talked about, that addressing the rise of the ethical consumer. So they want to purchase goods that they know have been treated fairly, that they know have been treated with the kind of either with the right chemicals or with no chemicals or whatever it is, you know, good, true products that they want to buy. And it turns out blockchain's a nice technology to try and offer that, what they call it, provenance. So it's kind of like, is this product what they say it is?
Yeah, for sure, And in terms of talking about the ethical consumer, it relates to some questions I want to talk with Kirsten about, you know, this kind of push for environmental innovation and sustainable practices. You know, how is that driving the need for new, sustainable, innovative, like, materials?
So it's really interesting. I think we're in a transition point right now where sustainability is going from being a bonus, a choice. I want to do good, to a necessity. So I don't know if you have run across something called World Overshoot Day.
I haven't seen that.
It's a really interesting data-based prediction about the date in the year at which we have used up all of the renewable resources that we could produce in that year. If everyone consumed resources like New Zealanders do, Overshoot Day would be May the 6th. So before we're even halfway through the year, we've used up all of the renewable resources that the Earth can produce and renew within that year. So sustainability is no longer really an option. It's a necessity. And one of the things that we in New Zealand need to do is get much smarter about how we use our resources and how we design our products and what materials we use in that.
Yeah, and you know, some of those examples, bioplastics, smart packaging, 3D printing, you know, alternative proteins and fertilisers. Talk to me more about some of those specifically.
So I might actually start off with smart packaging because it ties back in quite nicely with what Jonathan was just saying about blockchain. So I understand that packaging is a bit of a hot topic right now, and it can create some quite strong emotional responses in people. Personally, I'm trying to minimise my packaging at home, but I'm also very well aware that any product that we receive has to be in good order when we get it for us to use it. If it's not in good order, or if it's tainted in some way, then that's actually a bigger waste of resources and a bigger environmental impact than the packaging. Having said that, we can be smarter about our packaging. And so one of the really interesting things with the sort of provenance and traceability is if we can use new technology to introduce interactive intelligence into our packaging,
Yeah.
then that could not only help a New Zealand business to stand out in a crowded marketplace, but it could also give consumers the assurance, pick up their smartphone, scan the package, go, oh, yep, this meat's good to eat. Or, oh, yep, this is actually a genuine all-bird product.
Yeah.
And so you don't end up getting that same kind of waste if you can include intelligence in your packaging.
Fascinating. And who are the biggest movers and shakers in this industry right now?
So it is a growing industry. It's we're very good onshore in New Zealand at the moment at doing what's called active packaging, so the modified atmosphere packaging you get your meat in. Preserves it nicely. But in terms of that provenance and blockchain and traceability, Fonterra has moved into that.
Okay.
Because obviously they had some fairly significant issues around potential contamination a couple of years ago. Whereas if they've now got that traceability and provenance included, they can do a lot more to protect their reputation.
Okay, and this is potentially a pessimistic question. I'm just asking it to challenge.
Of
New Zealand is obviously a very small country in the world.
Yes.
So if we're clean and green, of course it's good for our shores. But if the United States and China and all these other countries are not pulling their part, like, we're not going to save the planet. So what can we do as a country to actually inspire the rest of the world to get better?
Well, I think it's one of those areas where New Zealand has, for quite a while, traded on our clean green brand and our 100% pure imagery. That's starting to come a little bit into question in terms of some of the international media. So if we can regain that as a country and lead the way and show some really good, interesting, sustainable systems onshore, then that could be quite an interesting challenge for other countries.
Yeah, exactly. And who can New Zealand be learning off? Like, who do you see around the world that you think is leading the space?
Personally, I think the Scandinavian countries are doing pretty well, but do you have any thoughts?
I think like New Zealand could actually be a really strong player in this.
Yes.
And we saw in the Genome report, which looks at kind of the startup ecosystems around the world, like New Zealand's in the top 10. New Zealand's rated in the top 10 for startup ecosystems in life sciences, agri-tech,
new foods.
So we've got some real strengths here. So I actually think New Zealand can be a leader in this area.
I think you raise a good point. I think the recent horrific terrorist attacks in Christchurch and the country's response and the Prime Minister's response proves that you don't have to be a big player to start making change, right? And the way the way the country has started to inspire the world to have some of those conversations around social media is inspirational.
And look at some of our great success stories. Look at Lanzatech and Sean Simpson's story, and that kind of like that deep tech environmental technology company, and how that's a global solution.
Absolutely. So just final few questions. I mean, there's so many changes going on, whether it's all the ones we talk about with space and autonomous vehicles and AI and blockchain. One of the other topics I wanted to touch on was alternative proteins, because that's been such a hot topic this year. I think this is, in some ways, has almost been like the blockchain of 2019 so far. With, I think I can't remember whether it was Beyond Meat or the Impossible Company IPO'd recently, and it's gone pretty crazy. So talk to me about that and how New Zealand is, where we fit into that space and that opportunity.
So actually, you probably saw the press that happened when Air New Zealand became the first airline in the world to have the Impossible Burger on their menu.
Oh, I didn't see that. Okay, that's so cool.
So Air New Zealand has already been leading the way in promoting and adopting that. In terms of the need to be looking at this, obviously we've got that issue around resources, resource constraints. It also feeds into one of the other megatrends that we've looked at around demographic change.
Yes.
We're getting more and more people on this world. How do we feed them? And so alternative proteins are a really interesting way to look at that.
Yeah.
But
and I was just going to say, like, I feel like there's so much going on. There are so many different kinds of technologies. Like, we've covered so many today. And like we pointed out at the start, the megatrends as well. The really important thing for businesses in New Zealand is that they sort of don't bury their head in the sand. That they actually start planning for these, and you can use scenario tools to kind of help plan how or at least challenge whether your business strategy is good for the future.
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah.
something that Kirsten and I are working on, is developing these scenario tools that companies can use to better plan for all of these different changes that are coming.
Yeah,
Yeah.
And obviously, like any entrepreneur, I know we're not just talking about entrepreneurs, we're talking about companies and the
Absolutely.
disruption of companies as well, and making sure that they stay on top. But from an entrepreneur's perspective, everybody wants to be before the hype as such, whether it's blockchain, or whether it's alternative proteins or whatever it may be. Drug liberalisation is another big trend around the world. What are both of your thoughts around sort of cannabis and the liberalisation that's occurring there, and how that mega trend that's going on around the world is ultimately probably going to affect New Zealand?
It is a really interesting area where there's an increasing amount of international evidence around what the impacts of those sorts of changes might be. And so it'll be interesting to see what the outcomes of the referendum will be.
Absolutely. So just before we finish off, I'm keen to understand a little bit more, just for the viewers, that what Callaghan Innovation is doing to promote these trends, to help people stay on top of all of these things that are going on. You spoke a little bit about it, but I'd love to understand that a little bit more.
So things that so our environmental innovation report, which will due out later in the year, that'll really kind of help people understand what the drivers of change and why we are arguing this is a really important area for New Zealand in the future.
Yes.
In the case of the future scenarios, that will be some stories and tools that people can use. For example, to take to their board or challenge their board to kind of say, well, how good is our strategy if these are the different scenarios? So quite useful to kind of in that strategic thinking.
And I think one of our real focus points here is that we are actually trying to provide active tools.
Yes.
Not just headlines. We're trying to provide things that people can use in their business, in their day-to-day life, to think about those futures.
Yeah, and just finally, what's both of your advice for businesses to stay on top of this, stay ahead of the curve, make sure you don't end up the next Kodak or the next Blockbuster?
So my particular advice would be actively block out a time in your timetable, in your calendar, every week, half an hour, 20 minutes, not read a podcast, listen to a podcast. Read something interesting that sort of sparks your interest and enthusiasm.
Absolutely.
And I would say go along to some meetups. You're going to meet people who are practitioners of this technology and entrepreneurs who are trying to come up with new business models.
Yes, that's fantastic. But to finish this session, guys, I was going to talk a little bit more about the new platform that Callaghan Innovation was delighted to launch in April. And I've got a lot of information here, but rather than me trying to explain it, I thought I'd let the experts do it. So tell us about this new platform.
Yeah, it's really exciting. So it's a way of connecting entrepreneurs and businesses with the people that they need at the time that they need it. So that could be people with money, that could be people with skills, partners, just a much more easy way of getting connected with the people that can help you do what you need to do.
Yeah, so this is Scale Up NZ. So check out Scale Up NZ. Scaleup.nz, I should say. So scaleup.nz is the domain, and that will have all this information on to truly help you grow your business. So Kirsten, Jonathan, thank you guys so much for being here. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much. It's been wonderful.
And thank you so much to Callaghan Innovation for your support of Tech Week and of this series. It's it means a lot, so we appreciate it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching, everybody, and we look forward to seeing you very shortly at the next session. Thank you very much.
If I had a mission statement for New Zealand, it would be a place where talent can thrive.